right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining CSA West Michigan today. We're very happy to have you here. We're calling this Heads in the Cloud. It's kind of our open dialogue intended to replace some of the social aspects we've lost, not having the in-person meetings as we shift to more virtual. And it's really discussions around topics that are relevant in our current climate and events happening around us today in our respective industries and in life and everything like that. So if you would, Dan, I'm going to have you start, give a brief introduction of who you are, what your industry is, and then we can kind of just go down the list. And then today's topic, just to set that up, is how architecture and IT solutions need to change to be more resilient for global pandemics. I'm really looking forward to some great dialogue. So without further ado, Dan, if you would, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, Dan Trigg. I'm a global security architect for Zurich Insurance out of Switzerland. My primary location here is in North America, and our industry vertical is obviously insurance and finance, really. So that's what we do.
Awesome, thank you. Kevin, if you would, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I work for one of the self-care industries here in the greater Grand Rapids area called Perigo. We make some of the over-the-counter drugs that are store brands that everyone takes every day. And one of the biggest focuses we've got right now is around paracetamol and acetaminophen and ibuprofen, which is going out to all those that are struggling during these times. My role there is around data analytics, data governance, testing, development, a whole bunch of different things that we do there. And so they sum it all up as a platform services team.
Excellent, thank you. James?
Hello, this is James Placer. I'm the Enterprise Security Architect for Kion Group out of Frankfurt, Germany, based out of the Grand Rapids area here in Michigan. We're an international logistics provider for logistics infrastructure. And to be totally legally compliant, I just have to state that anything I do say here represents my own opinions and does not represent any policy, standard statements, or direction of Kion Group.
Excellent. That is an important
You
note.
say that, but do you mean it?
I think that's safe to assume
put that
for
in the
all of us.
description,
But yes,
actually, yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll put that
Well
in
said, James.
the description as well, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well said for sure. All right, Llama Queen, Llama Princess.
Queen for sure.
All right.
Yeah, so I'm Sam Janak. I work with James at Dematic Kion Group as well. Most of the people I work with are in Germany. I am on the SOC team. We call it the Cyber Defense Center. I primarily work in vulnerability management and IPS alerts. I kind of do a little bit of everything in security here. And right now I'm based in the US in Grand Rapids, and I'm the only person on our SOC team working today, which is wonderful because it's a German holiday. So cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Sam.
Is there me, or does Europe have way more holidays than we do that people actually get off?
A ton of holidays.
Yeah. All right, Alex, you're up next.
Name is Alex Neal. I'm a security engineer for Spectrum Health in the vulnerability management group. Bread and butter is exactly that, much kind of in the same vein as Sam. Less so in the SOC, a little bit more on the enforcement side as well. And obviously in the healthcare sector. And again, also to kind of mirror whatever else is saying, anything I say is not reflective of Spectrum Health.
We don't mention names. You were supposed to say major healthcare organization.
Oh, there you go.
No one knows.
Rookies.
That's fine.
We'll bleep it
That's
out.
all right. Yeah, I was just saying we'll take it out in post, right? All right, Aaron, you are up, Mr. Major Healthcare Provider.
My name is Aaron Bragg. I'm the Director of Professional Outreach for the Cloud Security Alliance. I offer smooth jazz voice to the Cloud Security Alliance also. And I'm one of the lead information security analysts at a major healthcare organization in West Michigan.
That's how the professionals do it.
So you realize that's actually not any degree of security or non-repudiation. I mean, effectively, given your name and the fact that you're on LinkedIn, they can look up exactly who you work for.
That just shows you that there's a lot of things that are false sense security and privacy.
Good topic.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, data correlation to build data sets that breach privacy regulations is an interesting topic. That's probably for a different day.
Yeah, for sure. My name's Lloyd. I will be doing some moderation today, but like I said, I'm really hopeful that we'll have great dialogue today, open discussion. And I'm on the board here for CSA West Michigan. I also, for my day job, work at Spectrum Health, security analyst with Mr. Aaron Bragg there. So I'm very excited again that you're all here. And then we have Matt, who I don't think needs an introduction, but why don't you go ahead?
I probably need the most introduction. Matt Nelson, solutions architect for Optiv. We are a security solutions integrator, so help organizations put together a security portfolio and plan, as well as president of this little cloud security alliance thing we have going on here in West Michigan. So awesome. I'm just glad there's 7 smart people on the call, so I don't have to try to say anything. That never works out well.
Don't set the bar too high. It is a Friday.
It is a Friday. That is true. And it's the 1st of May. So, and this is our first official episode that we'll be posting. So really looking forward to it. Again, our topic is on change resilience, specifically how architecture and IT solutions need to change. But I think we can kind of be broad with that topic and wiggle around a little bit. And let's start off with kind of defining what that change resilience means. In a short sentence for me, it's really about the ability to adapt and recover from adverse effects in your environment and what's going on around you. So with that, why don't we go ahead and I'm going to open the floor up and everybody feel free to talk. Try not to talk on each other. Let's work that out.
Since no one's talking, I guess I'll start. So I guess the topic
for you to start.
Yeah, I figured everyone was waiting. I guess the topic rolls into a bigger topic of business resilience in general, right? Now, obviously, things like COVID-19, these global disruptions change how we think about business resilience. The standard model of either having a disaster recovery plan or using high availability for DR really has an infrastructure focus. And 1 second, my daughter's tearing up a bill, which I can't have her do. So anyway, yeah, welcome to COVID-19. We're at home with childcare.
Changes because of COVID, yeah.
Right, exactly. The resilience of caring for a child at home and how that disrupts work. That's another topic. But anyway, the key here is that what we consider typically in IT to be things that need to be resilient or we need to focus on for resilience, whether that's infrastructure, service, even training, right? Having staff as single-threaded has kind of been turned over on its head now because effectively workforce is now a risk. If workforce is sick or they're unavailable or they're not able to come into the office, what does that mean? How do we adapt to that, right? And 1 second, how do we adapt to this one? Right. I don't know if you guys are recording video, but my daughter is now sitting on my lap. So
yes, we are. So.
Okay. Well, that's fine.
You see, I'm going to step in here on the workforce. This is not a technological issue. This is an ideological issue.
Exactly.
To be honest, we have had the capabilities to work remotely, to interact remotely, to manage remotely, effectively, efficiently, for well over a decade. Mm-hmm. We can go back, previously when we were doing video conferences over ISDN lines, various shared whiteboards that have been around for a long time. Okay, that has existed. There is a generational change that is occurring in corporate leaderships, and you're seeing it in some companies, you're seeing it in other. This global effect is driving that significant change. There was a traditional model between, and I will use the term legacy leadership, we can call it old school in certain companies, that you needed to have the control over your employees. You needed to view them, otherwise it would not be as productive. Now, this does not apply to all companies. It does not apply to all employees at all. And some employees with a mindset are not capable of working remote or maintaining the focus. Others of us are working, as we have majority of us on this call, have a trouble of keeping the opposite side, inadequate work-life balance. We end up working more, which again, long-term is not healthy either. But with the workforce, this is forcing a generational change that has come up against what I'll call a ceiling, a resistance from a lot of older senior leadership. And they're having to rethink that.
But that's not necessarily, but that's not necessarily for security reasons, though. That was more, like you said, process related, making sure that people doing what they say they do. Yeah, I think that's more than just.
This is not a security topic. Like no. James said, it's an ideological topic, right? Can the modern workforce adapt to a white collar remote worker type environment that's basically mandated by COVID-19. And some industry verticals can do that, others can't, right? If you're point of sale, if you're working in a technical lab where you have to be hands-on, if you're part of a manufacturing plant where automation hasn't taken over, then there's no option. You have to have workers. Although I suspect even those plants that are doing manufacturing in the US, which is not a lot now, most of our manufacturing is overseas. I suspect given this COVID-19 thing, they're looking at there's a lot more emphasis on automation to avoid workforce issues.
There is, and also this COVID-19, again, I'm going to speak this may be different from other people's experience as a global company. It can drive decentralization. And let me be specific with that. We're talking about a cloud environment. What's the traditional version of a cloud environment? We're taking our global physical data centers, we are consolidating them into a specific cloud environment. I mean, we may be focusing on US West, US East, and Azure, the Azure instance up in Ireland, in various areas. So what has COVID-19 showed us? The internet backbone can't support generalized internet connectivity and traffic.
Not at these levels, yeah.
Not at these levels. So it's starting to rethink, is this a generational event, or do we look at means of real-time replication and decentralization, staying in a cloud environment, but spreading this around so we are more geodiverse and closer to our workforce? The traditional model. Go ahead.
You've touched on something really important there. So the single greatest source of innovation in modern times is war, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at World War I, if you look at World War II, even the Vietnam War, space race, pick your poison, right? Whether it's a Cold War or it's an active physical war globally, that's the biggest source of innovation we've ever seen in modern times. We don't have global wars anymore. We have global crisis like this global pandemic. And I think you're going to see, to your point, COVID-19 driving innovation, specifically innovation around the technology stack, being able to support this level of remote work and this level of raw throughput. And then innovation in how we think differently about working, how we balance things out. For example, a year and a half ago, I would have thought that a universal basic income in the US was a non-starter. No one would ever do that. And yet, a Republican administration effectively passed that and signed his name to these wonderful letters saying, I'm giving you free money. Look at me, I'm wonderful, right? Yeah. That actually happened under a Republican administration due to COVID-19.
You're going to have to see that because one of the industries we worked in, fully automated lights out warehouses. Let's face it, very, very high demand area in an infectious environment. We don't have people. We can still get you your items, your Amazon package, everything. USPS, FedEx will still deliver to you because there's no touch on the back end. Absolutely great. But now we have displaced workers. We have a growing population, yet we're still going to be increasing in GDP. So yeah, I fully agree. This will drive universal income. This is a generational change with one aspect. We have to come around and make a decision. Is this a generational event or is this the new normal? Because if this is a generational event, the cost of what we're talking about, universal income from a corporation, decentralizing our resources, economically may not be worth it if we view this as a generational event. Now, if we view this as an event that has a risk of occurring, say, every few years or 5 years, then I think we absolutely will be looking at that decision, both at a corporate and a government level, has not been made yet. We're in a tactical response yet, but we're starting to think of that.
So I think that decision has been made by the fact that if you look at our history, just on this one topic, right, global pandemics, we've had basically one every 10 years. Not as bad as this, right? But they're all capable of being this bad, depending on the nature of the virus, the transport method, how much of a global village we really are, allowing travel freely. These are things that aren't going to change. We want to get back to that. But I think this will change a few things. One, we'll probably be talking about this as to how to make certain business and industry verticals more resilient against these things. And two, I don't think all these workers are going to go back. I think at the end of the day, these people who are furloughed or who have been laid off, I think there's a good chance that a vast chunk of them will not be able to return to the jobs they had. and the jobs that they are returning to are probably going to be reduced in number because of a greater focus on automation.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree. This has
And
driven
that's a
automation.
huge disruption, right? That is a massive global disruption of the traditional workforce. You know,
But hold on, I don't disagree with you, but understand that that is inherently going to drive change also, because you have the flip side of that is you have maybe people like my wife who are, have tons of certification in her field, very talented, recruited all the time, but is not willing, did not want to move, right? So she liked the company she worked with. She didn't want to move. So even though other areas would be throwing money at her, she didn't want to move. Now you bring in you bring in the fact that you have entire EMR teams that are effectively functioning well remotely. Now it's going to open up more competition. So now, say a healthcare system in California that could use her expertise but couldn't get her to talk into moving, now it's viable, right? Like she really could perform her work remotely. So I think in some ways, yes, it's going to contract jobs, but I think it's going to expand the reach of where people work. And I think in that regards, electronically, global doesn't go away. We might decrease our global travel, our global trade, like you're talking about bringing more manufacturing home because we were caught with our pants down, so to speak. But I think it's going to spread out the global workforce. Does that make sense?
You see,
it
what I
does.
think,
But what you're describing is really just an evolution of what was already happening. So telepresence was already a thing, right? Doctors were using it. Your wife can use this now to provide her expertise. That's a natural evolution of what was already happening in your industry vertical. I'm talking more about these manufacturing jobs. I'm talking more about jobs that even something simple like, for example, education. If we have an education system that's capable of doing remote schooling for everyone, do we need as many teachers? Do we need to maintain brick and mortar buildings? Amazon right now is delivering groceries more than anybody else. Whole Foods is providing pickup services. Do we need the same number of people in these brick and mortar stores now? Or is this forcing us to create an IT digital infrastructure that supplants the human factor in a lot of these businesses, eliminating it and then providing better resilience? I think that's happening. I think, to be honest,
we'll
James,
have this. Let's pause that particular thought until your little one is in school full time. I can honestly tell you that the schooling part of this, as much as they've tried, and
is not perfect. Yep.
schools are better. It's not
perfect,
even
it's not
close.
working.
It's not even close.
well, and what we have to think here, and people have to be clear, you can view this as a discussion that we're having in absolutes. If we're talking about children, there are certain developmental stages where you need the social interaction. Current, mature, highly educated knowledge worker that is working on expanding their knowledge works very well remotely. Where we're talking about people being able to work remote and being mobile, that was always in the knowledge-based economy. This is just accelerating the uptake and acceptance. And I'm not even going to say uptake, I'm going to say acceptance of that. If we are looking at the specific class of worker, and not to involve that statement in any way, but hands-on manufacturing, yeah, that is automation. That automation has been going on for the last 40 years. This is accelerating it even more. So it's not so much that this was not occurring. This is now accelerating its uptake. So none of this is new, and be clear about that. And none of this is an absolute. This is great. If we're talking about education, I said there are certain areas where you need the broad scale psychological interaction properly developed. There are certain times when you reach certain maturity levels where you can learn yourself. With certain job positions, yes, we're doing a lot of telework. Knowledge-based work, intellectual cognitive-based work has always lent itself to the ability to be remote. We physically don't need to be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I see this with my oldest. My oldest Emily is very motivated, very knowledge driven. She's taking her virtual schooling and doing all of her homework in the first 2 days. Where my youngest Jordan is very social, isn't self motivated, and doesn't really want to dig into the knowledge until she gets some of the social aspects going and starts having those conversations. So it's really interesting to see how the two have adjusted to our current environment.
I mean, let's face it, you're going to tell your teenage kid, hey, you're going to stay home and you're not going to go to all your social high school dances and hang out with your friends. Dad,
Yeah.
trust me, as the father of a teenager,
No, I
let me know
I
how well
agree.
that works when you get there.
She's
But
asking.
here's the
She's
thing.
asking.
I've got 5 or 6 years to worry about this, and in those 5 or 6 years, innovation is going to happen. I know it's a little dated, but if you guys have read Alvin Toffler's Third Wave, the book speaks about the transition of blue-collar workers in the U.S. to white-collar workers in the U.S. This idea of moving from manufacturing, building stuff to a more service-based industry. Now we're seeing the movement from both manufacturing and service to, like you said, information technology or knowledge-based economy, right? Where our skill sets and our knowledge and our ability to service other industry verticals from an intellectual standpoint is now a sort of prime industry that caters very, very well to remote work. We've been doing remote work for decades now, right? This is not new for us. The degree
Right.
to which we're doing it is probably accelerated, but it's not a new thing. Now imagine applying that same 10 years or more to education or to telework from a hospital standpoint. We already have telepresence for doctors providing almost complete physicals remotely with some degree of success. If we have better sensors, if we have better integrated IoT, this all becomes a little better. So I think this is going to push that level of innovation, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But I think
Well,
there will
we've
be
already
massive work
had that.
disruption.
Just think about it. The stuff that we've done in the healthcare industry the last 6 weeks. I'm going to talk a little bit about it more on that the webinar panel that I get to join. The biggest thing is it's driven the need for flexibility, right? You now have to get biometric data that was traditionally reserved for an office visit. You now have to get that biometric data externally, right? Like in that person's home. So it's challenging the healthcare system to think about using technologies in much different ways. And this is going to have, this will be a forever impact. I do agree with you. Going back to James, is this a generational thing or is this a permanent change? For those parts, it's a permanent change. I do got to drop off, you guys. I'll try and jump back on, but I do have another meeting. Keep it going.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Appreciate you joining. So Kevin, a few minutes ago.
I want to hop in a little
Yeah.
bit on the manufacturing pieces. A lot of you are talking about these are shifting overseas, and at least in the industry I'm in, and at least for the organization I work for, all of our manufacturing, for the most part, over 60–70% of it is actually done right here in West Michigan. And so we produce the majority of the products that you guys are taking, and we continue to have our workforce show up. In fact, in the industry I'm in, it would be a little bit challenging to be able to produce in, oh my goodness, it's, you hear the alarm going
First
off?
Friday of the month.
Yeah.
Yep, siren
All
test.
All right, and I'm right next to it, so this will be perfect. But what we see is it would be really challenging, at least in our environment, to automate a lot of that, whether it's line clearances, whether it's meeting particular regulations around ensuring that the products that we're manufacturing, don't have an impact to patient safety. And so you might think that robotics actually makes that better and more consistent, but that's not the case, and that's not what we're seeing. And as of today, I would agree that over the next 5 to 10 years, if this continues, that push in that direction would continue to drive changes in that, and we'd start to see automation creep in and help drive less workers on site. But as of today, that's not happening. And so we continue to have, thankfully, low rates of absenteeism, as well as we continue to manufacture at, close to the rates we can typically. So it's been good, but yeah, just not seeing the changes as quickly as maybe we'd like.
I would say too that the automation may not just be in the production line, it may be in how you vet or even protect your workers. So I could see, for example, in an industry like yours that needs to stay up and needs to continue to manufacture through a crisis like this, changing how the plants are physically structured internally to enforce social distancing in the actual production line, so that you don't have
and that's
to.
happening for sure.
Yeah.
Right? We've got tape, almost like a what do you call that, Kanban style setup, or a 5S kind of setup, where you've taped out lines on the floor to say that you can't go beyond these lines. You've put face shields and plexiglass up around areas and regions to say this is kind of the area you work in, and you can't go beyond that. Not only does that help make people feel better, but it also helps when someone may have got in contact with this particular COVID-19, right? It isolates them and reduces the spread even internally.
And imagine what you're describing, right? So the robot is a technical control, to put it in security terms.
Right.
The tape you're describing is an administrative control.
Correct.
And imagine the fallout after this is all blown over of the lawsuits for a lack of due diligence and due care, for administrative controls protecting workers, and how that's going to change how we actually enforce worker policy in the US. We are a litigious, rich country, right? So if 10 workers at plant X have COVID-19 because they came to work and they can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, I guess. Well, that'd be a civil lawsuit, so it's a little different. But there could be down-level legal implications of this. We may be forced to legally build in what your company has already done, right? Show that they're doing a certain degree of due care and then prove due diligence in protecting workers to make sure they can come to work and be safe. And if you look at what's happening in the meat industry right now, I think Trump is passing a law or an executive order saying those people have to go to work. And if they feel they're not safe and they choose not to show up, that's effectively quitting, and they don't get any unemployment insurance. So they're forcing to keep the supply chain for meat active, meat plant employees to go to work despite massive outbreaks in that industry.
Yeah.
That is going to have down-level legal implications. If that industry can't show appropriate administrative controls to limiting the risk to their staff, that's going to be a very, very interesting set of lawsuits in a year or so, especially if deaths are involved.
I think it's disruptive to the supply chain too. The industry my girlfriend's in, she has noticed that as like over in Detroit, for example, as their warehouses are shutting down because there's so many people infected with COVID and just not able to come in to run the supply chain. They've had to divert all of that, all of that product over to Grand Rapids, and they just were not prepared and weren't staffed for the volume that Detroit takes. So it'll be interesting as well, not only to the litigious sense of people getting sick, but also to how industries will adapt to changing how they ship their products when one area just shuts down because everybody's sick because they were forced to come to work.
So a couple of questions. Let me circle back around to some stuff that I've been hearing here. So so James and Sam, I was in a conversation yesterday where I was bringing up, we're talking digital transformation, and I was bringing up the idea of like workerless warehouses and workerless supply chains. And there was a lot of people that were on the conversation that were like, yeah, that's not going to happen, or that's so far off in the future. Can you guys talk about where you're seeing that industry and how fast we're moving? I know there's some of it already, but like, as a mainstream way of doing that, can you talk around that a little bit?
It's here. This is not a far off topic. It's here. I mean, you have fully autonomous AGVs. They self-service them so they know when they're down. They plug themselves in for charging. You have warehouses that in the past would have to run with, hundreds of people. Now the only staff they have are maintenance staff. So when the appropriate infrastructure notifies them and said, hey, we're running low and need to get fixed. Now, it depends on the area. There are some that, based upon the type of product, you have to manually handle them. Robots can't handle certain items. Let's face it. It depends on the type of packaging. But for a lot of what you're doing, a lot of your prepackaged food items, think cereal and all that, warehouses, cold warehouses, no, this is not far off. This is here. This has been, this is where we're going.
Yeah, James, I'll echo and I'll say I've seen that in two different industries, one in automotive and one in I guess pharmaceuticals. And so in this case, you'll see in automotive, you'll see seats move down a line where they're, other than somebody putting trim pieces on, it gets to the end of the line, reloads a robot, the robot takes it all the way over to the shipping area, loads it on a truck, and the truck heads out the door, right? And there's not much human interaction besides assembling the parts. In the pharma space, whether it's bringing components to the line, all that's done by auto-guided vehicles. So it is here today, right? Nobody is physically driving a high-low any longer. You've got AGVs out in these plants that literally can pick a pallet right up out of the rack, pull it right down and bring it right to the line. We even see it when we're unloading components from a truck that's just arrived on delivery. The truck backs up and a guided vehicle actually goes into the truck and removes the parts and stages it in racks for another AGV to come to pick it up to actually go put it away.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
I'd say it's here.
It's here. So if you have people that are saying that they're not really involved in basically the high-end logistics industry is what I'll say. They may be in some of the smaller areas, but yeah, this is not new. Smart tags have been around for years, and as Ken said there, trucks pull in automatically. Automated AGVs come in. All of these are tagged down to the individual unit. They are unloaded. They are taken by AGVs or robotic handling systems. They are packed via robotic systems into boxes for shipment. They are put onto your FedEx truck robotically. A lot of these very large warehouses, if the product is capable of it, are the only staff in them is for maintenance when these automated systems say we are now under a maintenance cycle. That's the only staff you'll have. One of the big things that is driving this field, again, micro fulfillment, smaller ones put in regional areas that are automated. In other words, think, you're going to do your ship thing. Right now you have ship people running around and putting stuff in your bags. You can pull up and that could be all done automatically. That's the next phase that's going. The real discussion now here is how do we package product that right now has to be handled manually because it could not be properly handled by a robot? That's the big discussion in the field.
Okay. So
yeah, I want to share a little bit about what we're seeing in the supply chain as well, and maybe it'll help on that, is the diversity within a product. So during this time, one of the things that we're really focused on is how do you simplify that diversification? Everybody wants to purchase something the way they want it, but as workforces are being reduced, we tend to say, look, if you want to go buy a bottle of ibuprofen, well, guess what? You're going to get a 250 bottle count, and that's all you're going to get, right? And so I think that's a trend that we'll see as well, and that may actually help in some of that, how do you package these things that can't be touched by even human or by a robot today?
So in an era where people are getting accustomed to getting whatever they want, however they want, you could see a trend moving away from that, where it's like, from a cost savings and automation savings, this is how you're going to get this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you guys just talked about removing the packers from those product lines that require the human touch for packaging, because right now robots can't do it. Fragile stuff, or you're packaging multiple items, and it's more complex than what robotics can do with current machine learning. If we eliminate that chunk of the fulfillment and supply chain employment, that's probably what, 50% of the Amazon employees right now at your typical Amazon distribution center are still involved in packaging and everything else. That is a massive loss of workforce. That alone, if your industry, James, solves this problem, that's going to put thousands of people just in Grand Rapids area and West Michigan out of work. So again, if this is solved because we want it solved, we don't want humans touching these things, these people are not going back to work. And this is going to fundamentally change how people are working and employed here in the U.S. and probably globally.
But Dan, that kind of brings me back to the other part of the, from what I was listening to earlier, and I know we talked about this a little bit last time. I think we've always looked at haves and have-nots in this country as like ultra rich versus everyone else. Are we moving into an era where haves and have-nots are people that have the IQ or the skill or the desire to understand all of this stuff, or don't? Because I see, like, with education right now, there are kids that are still doing okay being taught from home because their parents have the money to do the internet and the laptops and all of that stuff, and the wherewithal to be able to do that schooling at home. And then other kids who are really struggling because they have none of those things. So are we socially moving into a different era of have and have nots?
Yes. So I would say that honestly, that question is probably its own meeting by itself, because you're talking about a social change. If we talk about UBI and universal basic income, right, that's basically to allow someone a minimum level of survivability inside of our society. It doesn't equalize education. It doesn't equalize healthcare. So what you're describing is basically, if you have a child who is X years old, they get this interface into a good school system regardless of their income level, and that is a guaranteed right. We don't have that here in the US, right? We probably need that. And as we talk more about UBI and some of the things as a response to COVID-19 and the massive economic and workforce disruptions, I suspect these will be topics we will have to deal with, or if not this generation of politicians, the next one.
For sure. We're getting down to about the last.
That, right? We've always been a like pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of society, and I'm starting to feel like there's going to be a group of people that don't have any bootstraps to pull themselves up by.
I think we're already there.
Yeah, I think that's been the way for a while, and now it's just with everything that's happening, it's just going to be even more so. That's pull yourself by your bootstraps has been kind of like the go-to motto of like, hey, you can make it in America if you do this. But the reality was it never matched that. It's a matter of, okay, where do you come from? Who are your parents? Who do you know? And what resources do you have and get access to position you in a better spot for your life? So I think to Dan's point, the reality of what we're going to be facing is just going to be an ever widening gap until there is an actual equalization of education. But I think that is going to be something for politicians in 2050.
I'm gonna step in on that education aspect here. When you're talking about a generational gap or haves and have-nots, this is a failure of mindset in education. Whether you are homeschooling, whether you are doing remote schooling, whether you are doing in school, school and the academic setting right now is set up to teach you what to learn. You will learn A, you will learn B, you will learn C. That is the primary focus. Where our education system is failing is we are not teaching people how to learn. The people that will survive this change are now going to be flexible. Everyone on this call, we have changed our positions, our focus, what we did, and probably our education at least multiple times. We have the ability to learn, to adapt. And a lot of times we have learned that from outside of our education system, or we had a very specific, shall we say, instructors. Well, these could be university professors or other ones in our, other education, whether it's grade 1 through 6, that basically taught us look at everything with a curious mindset, be willing to learn. 90% of our education system, you may agree with this, I say, does not teach you how to learn. It is focused on what you should learn.
It's regurgitation.
It's an excellent topic. I think that we should probably cover in another session because we're kind of getting away from change resilience. No, that's okay, Matt.
To me,
I do want to add one quick thing to James.
I feel like we're in a fascinating, somewhat frightening time, right? From a lot of different, and we look at things from somewhat rose-tinted glasses because of our jobs and our roles and all of that stuff. But I think there's a lot of people that are out there that are looking at this from a completely different perspective. I think it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, we're getting down to the last 15 minutes here. So Dan, I'll let you speak here in a second, but I did want to get to some actions we could take at the end. And I'd love to hear from Sam. There was a comment in the chat here about targeted malware and things. So Dan, if you want to go ahead and make your last comment there, and then let's give Sam an opportunity to talk if she'd like, or we can jump into just some actions we can take here in the last 15 minutes.
Yeah, I've been prompting Sam in chat to sound off on some of the stuff she's seeing in the SOC or the SDC as they call it, and get key on. But I just want to say, regardless of whether it's workforce or it's education, right? These kind of social stressors that are created by something like COVID-19 or a war, right? Or a generation of people going off to respond to 9/11 overseas and then coming back and having to adjust. These create a certain degree of social tension and pressure, and we end up really exacerbating and having to pay for our past mistakes. So to James's point, we spent the last 40 years deconstructing education in this country, underfunding it, debating curriculums, debating things like whether science is bad and whether, a culture of not fact is supposed to have equal measure in our education of our youth, where that was probably better off left to parents and individual children and everything else. This is something we're going to pay for now. And when we have social stress created by something like COVID-19, all of this gets a very, very fine lens put upon it because we end up paying for those past mistakes. Everything is amplified. And we're seeing that, right? We're seeing our politics go off the rails. We're seeing our education system kind of fail us. We're seeing everything, something like the internet, which we thought was this robust system, itself be under stress. For the first couple of weeks when everybody was remote in the US, we had issues with Teams, with WebEx, with Zoom, right? All these technologies were pushed to their very, very limits. And we've adapted very, very quickly in the technical space because that's what we do. But these larger social issues, education, modernizing the workforce, UBI, or the basic rights we afford our individuals so they have the ability to take care of their families and actually be safe, all of that stuff is going to have to be reviewed because it's under tremendous stress. And that will invariably disrupt how businesses operate and the sort of solutions IT is going to be forced to create as part of that response. So that's something to think about as an architect or as an engineer, or even just a thought leader in your industries. Think about how this is going to affect us socially and globally, because that will trickle down into your organizations.
For sure, for sure. Okay, so Sam, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the shifting cyber threats about,
Sure.
as companies are being targeted here.
So I was really expecting that we would see more of an uptick in threats and people trying to attack our network, and we've been dealing with this since January, right? We have business in China, business in Italy, Germany, all over, um, and of course we've seen a lot of the more phishing campaigns that people are sending out. They are coronavirus themed. Hey, here's your check from the government, IRS. This is your voucher for being able to leave your house. Please download this file. Sure, yeah. But I mean, I really thought that it was going to be a lot more malware, and it seems to be pretty steady for us. And I'm not sure if that's just because we have done a really good job on my team of implementing new products. Our SIEM is being stood up great. A lot of our security orchestration and automation, I mean, that's huge. And I think that's one of the most important things that we've done, because our employees are just fantastic right now at reporting threats that they're seeing, and they're learning more every day. And I think actually being home and seeing everything that's going on in the world has made them more observant of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually been a great teaching moment for everyone, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good example of an action we can take. And as we go into the last 10 minutes here, I think, as we look at what is supposed to be in this country, the pinnacle of leadership saying you have to come to work, whether you're going to, get really sick or not. I think some of the actions we could take, both as individuals and as organizations, is to reshift focus back to your employees. Like we talked about, make sure they can work safely, give them the tools that they need, and really kind of take this opportunity to really build that up and make a difference for your organization instead of just focusing so much on the top. So anybody else have any thoughts around some other actions we could take as we close up?
You stunned them all.
Perhaps.
I think that means it's your turn.
I think I've talked enough, so I'm going to stay quiet for a bit.
I mean, to be honest, I think if we're talking about remote work security, to be honest, a mature organization, which we're all in, we've got that down cold. We have virtual environments, we have secure remote access, we have ways to control everything on our remote issued laptops. They're updated. This is foundational work that we have put in our companies for a long time. It was a matter of scale, not substance. Again, for majority of people on this call, but not for every company, and I want to be specific about that.
I am going to add something to that. I think when we think about this as a disruptor, right, we need to think about people, process, and technology. And the first thing in that statement is people. I think as IT individuals, we tend to be very black and white, and often we can lack empathy. This is going to hurt workforce. This is going to disrupt projects. It's going to disrupt development. It's going to create all kinds of stress. We need to personify empathy as we look forward and try and build solutions for our verticals and our organizations. I think if nothing else, we can't forget this crisis has a human toll, and that is something that should be first and foremost in our minds as we move this forward. So anything, for example, that we can do to ease that burden or assist in those projects that help a company maintain staffing levels and cut costs and do those things so we're not seeing these mass firings or these long furloughs. of individuals who may not come back, or honestly, the deaths of loved ones, and understanding what that does to the morale of our workforce and how that can cause stress in meetings or stress in technology solutions. The human factor cannot be ignored because it's quite tragic.
You articulated that much better than I did.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Kevin.
I think I'll touch on the people part as well there, just like James and Dan there. You know, how you lead in this time is really different than how you lead when everyone's kind of together and on-prem. It's hard to just kind of do that walk up and check in and see how people are doing. It's also hard to get what I find is kind of that trust, if you want to put that big T, trust out there in you as a leader. So me leading number of people, it's how do you continue to build that in a time where you're not face to face, where body language, because you're not always with video, can't tell the story that it typically would tell when you're there. And then how do you stay connected as a team? You know, we find as a team that, you know, whether it's those walk-ups or team meetings or doing, you know, charity events outside, well, a lot of those are challenging and hard to do right now, and to continue to be connected and build those relationships so that the team can work really well together. I also think it's really important that we continue to stress to people that you still need a vacation. Sure, you might not be able to leave your house, right, per se, or go on a real vacation, but time away from work, we need to encourage our people to not blend their entire day in between work and life, and actually have a stopping moment, right? It's really beneficial for me to say, it's 5 o'clock, it's time to turn that email off, time to turn that computer off, and you know, focus on family, focus on, you know, whatever friends or whatever it is you need to do to rejuvenate. It's hard right now for people to create that separation and to be connected and to feel that they're engaged in an organization.
So Sam, Alex, Matt, any closing thoughts, since we've heard from the rest of us now here as we wrap up, on things we could do or anything else you'd like to add here to the end of the conversation?
I also think that we should all be increasing our monitoring for insider threats with all the people that are getting let go or furloughed. It just increases the risk there. So make sure you're monitoring more for data exfiltration and different things. So
you better have some identity stuff in place too, right? And make
Yeah.
sure that you're removing access to all these people as you're letting them go. They're not happy about it, right? A month ago, they had a job, some of which they've maybe been working at for a very long time, and it's gone. And now they don't know what they're doing. So,
yeah, exactly.
I think I'm a little bit biased just because my brain's kind of solidly in the vulnerability management side. But the thing that immediately comes to mind for actions is to just be trying to be extra judicious in being aware of the threats that impact your organization, your vertical. Because I'm trying to think of, like, if we had like that Citrix vulnerability that was present back in December, that was hitting its heyday now, with everybody switching to a more focused on remote, and threat actors are specifically looking for ways into that remote workflow to really compromise that. This would be probably a much hairier time, but then it comes down to the big question of, like, okay, with the big focus being placed more on stability and uptime for infrastructure, what patches are critical enough to force through, or what is acceptable for making sure that things aren't going to break. So I think it's just being and raising as much awareness around that, and just trying to be as on top of it as you can for your organization would be the best action item in my mind right now.
yeah, and I'll just finish with, and Kevin, I think, said it very well, of utilizing our positions, right, and all of the blessings, whatever you want to call them, that we have in our lives to, you know, show leadership, show compassion, do all the things that security people are not always great at doing, especially the compassion part of everything that's going on. And so, you know, something that we can all do, be at the CSA meeting next Thursday. We're going to be giving about 12,000 meals worth of funding to Feeding America Food Basket next Thursday. So I'll just make it an advertisement at the end, but you know, continuing to try to do stuff. I think you know, this community is pulling together and showing a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here. And I think that's a very positive thing that, you know, we should continue to share with other areas that are maybe not as West Michigan nice as we are.
For sure. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the close here. Thank you again, everybody, so much for joining today. I think this was great discussion. We covered a lot of ground here. And if you're watching this, please like and subscribe on the channel. That would be fantastic. And we look forward to speaking to you all again. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care and be safe, everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.